The medical bay of Station Kepler 9 hummed with the usual symphony of alien life support systems when Dr. Sarah Chen heard the commotion outside. She was elbow-deep in treating a Vaxorian trader's acid burns, but the shouting in the corridor made her pause. The translator implant in her ear caught fragments of panicked voices speaking in at least 4 different languages. Sarah finished sealing the wound and wiped her hands clean. The Vaxorian chittered his thanks, his mandibles clicking in gratitude. She barely acknowledged him as she moved toward the door. 20 years working in frontier medicine had taught her that when multiple species started shouting simultaneously, something serious was happening. The corridor outside was chaos. A crowd had gathered near the main entrance, and through the press of bodies, she could see station security trying to maintain order. The Kepler 9 station orbited a mining planet on the edge of Council space, far from the gleaming core worlds where humans had made their mark. Out here, rules bent more easily and violence was common. Sarah pushed through the crowd, her small human frame allowing her to slip between larger aliens. A Thaxian security officer tried to stop her, but she flashed her medical credentials. The officer's faceplates flickered with annoyance before he stepped aside. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. A small creature lay on the deck plating, no larger than a human child. Its scales were pure white, almost translucent, catching the station's artificial light and throwing it back in rainbow patterns. Blood, shockingly red against the pale scales, pooled beneath it. The creature's breathing came in shallow gasps, and its eyes, large and golden, fixed on Sarah with an intelligence that struck her immediately. A baby dragon. An actual dragon like from the old Earth stories, except this one was real and dying on the floor of her station. Sarah dropped to her knees beside it without thinking. Her hands moved automatically, checking for vital signs, assessing injuries. The creature's pulse was rapid and thready beneath her fingers. 3 deep gashes cut across its flank, and one wing hung at an unnatural angle. Someone grabbed her shoulder hard enough to bruise. Sarah looked up into the face of Commander Zilshak, the station's head of security. His reptilian features were twisted with what she had learned to recognize as anger. Step away from the creature, human. This does not concern you. Sarah ignored him, reaching for the medical kit she always carried. This creature is injured and needs immediate treatment. That concerns me. Zilshak's claws dug deeper into her shoulder. The creature is scheduled for termination. Galactic Council orders. Move away now. The words hit her like a physical blow. She looked down at the dragon's face again. Those golden eyes held fear, pain, and something else. Pleading. The creature understood exactly what was happening. Sarah had seen many things in her years on the frontier. She had treated pirates, smugglers, and worse. She had learned when to look away and when to stand her ground. Something about this moment, about this creature, demanded the latter. No, she said simply. The crowd around them went silent. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic stage. Barely 2 generations since first contact. They had earned respect through their medical knowledge and their stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. But directly defying a council order was something else entirely. Zilshak released her shoulder and stepped back, his hand moving to his weapon. You do not understand what you are protecting, human. That creature is the offspring of the Pale Death. Its mother has been declared a threat to all civilized species. The bloodline must end. Sarah's fingers found the emergency beacon on her medical kit. With one press, every medical station within 3 systems would receive an alert. Ancient Earth law, upheld by the Galactic Medical Covenant, stated that no medical professional could be prevented from treating a patient in immediate danger. It was one of the few human contributions to galactic law that had been universally adopted. The beacon activated with a soft chime that everyone present recognized. Zilshak's face went through several color changes. Fury, frustration, and finally resignation. The medical beacon was sacred. Even he could not override it without facing severe consequences. But his eyes promised that this was far from over. You have made a grave mistake, Dr. Chen. When the council officials arrive, they will not be as patient as I am, and they will want answers about why you have chosen to protect an abomination. Sarah lifted the small dragon carefully, cradling it against her chest. It weighed almost nothing. All delicate bones and gossamer wing membrane. She could feel its heart racing against her hands. Then I'll give them answers, she said, after I save this patient's life. She carried the dragon back to her medical bay, aware of every eye following her. The crowd parted silently, and she caught glimpses of various expressions. Some aliens looked horrified. others curious, and a few, surprisingly, seemed approving. Inside the medical bay, Sarah sealed the door and activated the privacy shields. Only then did she allow herself to examine her patient properly. The injuries were severe but not immediately fatal. She could work with this. The dragon watched her every move with those intelligent golden eyes. When Sarah began cleaning the wounds, it did not struggle or cry out, though the pain must have been intense. Instead, it remained perfectly still, as if understanding that she was trying to help. "What's your story?" Sarah murmured as she worked. "What did your mother do that was so terrible?" The dragon could not answer, of course, but as Sarah stitched the deep gashes and set the broken wing, she made a silent promise. Whatever came next, whatever the council wanted, she would find out the truth. And she would not let them kill this creature without answers. Outside, she could hear more commotion. The council officials were probably already on their way. Sarah had maybe a few hours before everything changed. She looked down at her patient, now stabilized and resting on a heated pad. The dragon's breathing had steadied, and its eyes had finally closed in exhausted sleep. Sarah pulled up her data terminal and began searching for information about white dragons. The files she found made her blood run cold. The Pale Death, as Zilshak had called her, was legendary across a dozen systems. But the official reports contradicted each other wildly. Some called her a monster. Others called her a victim. Sarah needed more information, and she needed it fast, because she had just painted a target on her own back, and she needed to know if the creature sleeping peacefully in her medical bay was worth dying for. Sarah spent the next 3 hours diving deep into the Galactic databases, searching for any information about white dragons and the creature called the Pale Death. What she found was frustrating in its contradictions. The official council reports painted a picture of a rogue predator that had attacked mining colonies and transport ships across the Outer Rim. But when she cross-referenced those reports with independent sources, survivor testimonies, and sensor logs, a different story emerged. The attacks had all occurred near a single nebula, the Shattered Veil. Every incident report mentioned the same thing. The white dragon had appeared only when ships or colonies had ventured into what the local spacer communities called the Dead Zone, areas marked off limits by ancient treaties that most modern council members seem to have forgotten. More interesting was what Sarah did not find. There were no actual death counts, no lists of victims. Every report used vague language about threats to commerce and disruption of territorial expansion. It read less like documentation of a monster and more like justification for removing an obstacle. A soft chirping sound pulled her attention back to the medical bay. The small dragon had woken and was attempting to sit up despite its injuries. Sarah moved quickly to its side, gently pressing it back down onto the heated pad. "Easy there, little one. You need to rest." The dragon's golden eyes fixed on her face, and Sarah felt a strange sensation, like a butterfly's wing brushing against her thoughts. Not words exactly, but impressions. Gratitude, confusion, fear. Sarah had heard rumors that some species could communicate telepathically, but she had never experienced it herself. Humans were considered telepathically deaf by most galactic standards, their minds too noisy and chaotic to receive clear signals, but this felt different. Simpler. More emotional than linguistic. She placed a hand gently on the dragon's head, between the small horns that were just beginning to emerge. "I'm going to help you, I promise. But I need to understand what happened. Why does the council want you dead?" The dragon made a low sound, somewhere between a purr and a whimper. Its tail curled around Sarah's wrist, the scales cool and smooth against her skin. Another flutter of emotion reached her. Loneliness, loss, and underneath it all, a desperate need to find something. Someone. "Your mother," Sarah said softly. "You're looking for your mother." The dragon's response was immediate and powerful. Images flooded Sarah's mind, clearer than before. A vast cavern filled with crystalline formations. A larger dragon, majestic and pale, curled protectively around several eggs. The feeling of safety and warmth. And then fire and screaming. Explosions. The larger dragon roaring in defiance as armored figures stormed the cavern. Eggs shattering under plasma fire. Sarah jerked back, gasping. The dragon had released her wrist, but the images remained burned into her memory. Not an attack, a massacre. The council had not just ordered the mother's death. They had tried to wipe out the entire bloodline. "They came for all of you," Sarah whispered. "But you survived. Somehow you survived and made it here." The dragon watched her with ancient eyes that seemed far too old for its young body. Sarah's hands trembled as she checked her patient's vital signs again, more to give herself something to do than from medical necessity. Her mind raced through implications and consequences. A sharp knock on the medical bay door made them both freeze. Sarah's heart hammered as she checked the door's security camera. 3 figures stood outside, and she recognized the distinctive armor of council enforcement officers. The middle one wore the purple sash of a high investigator. "Dr. Chen," a voice called through the intercom, smooth and cold. "I am High Investigator Torvax. Open this door immediately. You are harboring a confirmed biological threat in direct violation of Council Emergency Statute 7. Sarah glanced at the dragon, then back at the door. The medical beacon gave her some protection, but it was not absolute. If Torvax decided to override it, she would face serious consequences. Career-ending consequences. Possibly life-ending, given how far from civilized space they were. Her hand hovered over the door controls. 20 years of careful navigation through galactic politics. 20 years of building a reputation as a reliable, non-controversial human who followed the rules. All of it would evaporate the moment she defied a high investigator. The dragon made a small sound, drawing her attention. It had struggled to its feet despite its injuries, positioning itself between Sarah and the door, protecting her. This tiny, wounded creature was trying to protect her from armed council enforcers. Something in Sarah's chest tightened and then broke free. She had spent 2 decades playing it safe, treating symptoms while ignoring causes, looking away when convenient. She had told herself it was pragmatic, necessary, the cost of surviving on the frontier. But looking at this small dragon, remembering those images of shattered eggs and deliberate slaughter, Sarah realized she was done looking away. She pressed the intercom button. "High Investigator Torvax, I'm currently in the middle of a critical medical procedure. Under Article 12 of the Galactic Medical Covenant, I cannot be interrupted until my patient is stable. You'll have to wait." Silence. Then Torvax's voice returned, sharper now. "Doctor, I strongly advise you to reconsider. The creature you are treating is not protected under medical law. It has been classified as vermin, not as a sentient being." Sarah's jaw clenched. Sentience classifications require extensive testing and peer review. I've reviewed the Council's files on white dragons. No such testing was ever conducted. Until, proven otherwise, this patient receives full medical protection. More silence. Sarah could almost hear the calculations happening on the other side of the door. Torvax was probably assessing whether forcing entry was worth the diplomatic incident it would cause. Humans were still newcomers to the galactic stage, but they had made powerful friends through their medical expertise. Attacking a human doctor performing legitimate medical care would create problems. Finally, Torvax spoke again. "Very well, doctor. Complete your procedure. But understand this. The moment you declare that creature stable, I will be entering to take custody of it, and there will be consequences for this obstruction. I suggest you use your time wisely to reconsider your position." The footsteps retreated, but Sarah knew they had not gone far. Torvax would be waiting, probably with reinforcements on the way. She had bought time, but not much. The dragon had relaxed slightly, settling back onto the heated pad. It looked up at Sarah with those unsettling golden eyes, and she felt another brush of emotion. Curiosity. Why was she doing this? What did she hope to gain? "Honestly," Sarah said aloud, checking the room's sealed communication system, "I'm not entirely sure, but I know genocide when I see it. And I know that when powerful people try very hard to hide the truth, it's usually worth finding." She pulled up a secure terminal and began composing a message. Not to council authorities or station security. Those channels were compromised. Instead, she reached out to an old friend, someone she had not spoken to in years but who owed her a significant favor. Dr. Marcus Webb worked at the Avalon Institute, humanity's premier xenobiology research center. More importantly, he had connections to the human diplomatic corps. If Sarah was going to stand against the council, she needed backup from her own species. The message was brief. Marcus, remember that favor you owe me? I'm calling it in. I need everything you can find about white dragons, the Shattered Veil Nebula, and council expansion in the Outer Rim. And I need it yesterday. Lives depend on this. She encrypted the message with her personal codes and sent it through 3 relay stations to hide its origin. Then she turned back to her patient, who had been watching the entire process with apparent interest. All right, little one, Sarah said. We've got maybe 12 hours before this situation explodes, so I need you to help me understand what we're up against. Can you show me more? Show me what really happened to your mother? The dragon tilted its head, considering. Then slowly, carefully, it reached out with its mind again. And this time Sarah was ready for what she would see. The images came slower this time, more controlled. The dragon was learning to communicate with Sarah's strange human mind, adjusting its telepathic sending to something she could process without being overwhelmed. What Sarah saw made her stomach turn. The white dragon that the council called the Pale Death was not a mindless beast. She was a guardian, the last of her kind tasked with protecting something ancient and vital. Within the Shattered Veil, Nebula lay ruins, structures so old that most species had forgotten they existed. The ruins contained technology from a civilization that predated the current council by millions of years. Technology that could reshape the galaxy. The white dragons had been created, engineered long ago by that ancient civilization to prevent anyone from accessing the ruins until the galaxy was ready. They were not just guardians but living keys, their genetic code necessary to activate or deactivate the security systems protecting the sites. But the council had discovered hints of what lay hidden in the Shattered Veil. Mining surveys had detected energy signatures that suggested power sources beyond anything currently available. With the council's expansion slowing and resources becoming scarcer, those in power saw an opportunity. If they could access the ancient technology, they could cement their control over the galaxy for another 1,000 years. There was just one problem. The white dragon refused to let them pass, so they had rewritten history, fabricated attack reports, created a narrative of a dangerous predator that needed to be eliminated for public safety, and then they had sent their best hunters to kill her and destroy her eggs, wiping out the genetic lock that kept them from the ruins. The mother dragon had fought back with everything she had. She had destroyed mining stations and attacked ships, but only those that violated the ancient boundaries, only those that tried to reach the ruins. Every action twisted by council propaganda into evidence of her monstrosity. In the end, she had known she could not win, so she had done the only thing she could. She had taken her last surviving egg and fled, hoping to hide it somewhere the council would never think to look. A backwater station on the edge of nowhere, filled with species too busy surviving to care about galactic politics. But they had followed her, tracked her somehow, and when she had landed on Kepler 9 to hide her egg, they had been waiting. The final images were fragmented, seen through the dragon's cracking shell. Her mother fighting, roaring defiance even as plasma fire tore through her wings, blood spattering across metal deck plating, and her voice, the last thing the hatchling heard before its mother died, a telepathic command burned into its infant mind. Find help. Find the truth speakers. Make them understand. Sarah came back to herself with tears streaming down her face. The dragon had collapsed on the heated pad, exhausted from the effort of sharing its memories. She could see it breathing heavily, its small body trembling. Truth speakers, Sarah whispered. She meant humans, didn't she? That's why you came to the medical bay. Why you didn't run when the security teams were hunting you. Dragons were supposed to be ancient and wise, even the young ones carrying racial memories from their ancestors. The mother must have known about humanity's reputation. Humans were notorious across the galaxy for their stubborn insistence on asking uncomfortable questions, for digging up buried truths and refusing to accept convenient lies. It was why they had been kept out of council leadership positions despite their contributions. They were too unpredictable, too unwilling to maintain comfortable fictions. Sarah's terminal chimed softly. A response from Marcus faster than she had expected. She pulled up the message, her hand still shaking from the intensity of the telepathic exchange. Sarah, what have you gotten yourself into? I ran your search terms through some back channels. The shattered veil is flagged at the highest classification levels. Even mentioning it triggered alerts. But I found something. An anthropologist named Dr. Keiko Sato published a paper 20 years ago about ancient guardian species. It was buried and suppressed, but I managed to recover a partial copy. The white dragons are not predators. They're peacekeepers, and if the council killed one, they've just committed one of the worst violations of galactic law in history. Sending you the files now. Be careful. People who ask these questions have a habit of disappearing. The attached files began downloading through the encrypted channel. Sarah scanned them quickly, her medical training helping her process vast amounts of information rapidly. Dr. Sato's research was meticulous and damning. She had traced white dragon sightings back thousands of years, always in the same locations, always associated with ancient ruins. Every civilization that had tried to force access to those ruins had collapsed shortly after, destroyed by technology they could not control. The white dragons were not keeping treasure from the galaxy. They were protecting the galaxy from itself. A loud bang on the medical bay door made Sarah jump. Torvax's voice came through the intercom, no longer polite. Dr. Chen, your time is up. We're overriding the medical lock. Stand away from the creature. Sarah looked at the door, then at the dragon. She had maybe 2 minutes before they forced entry. 2 minutes to decide whether to hand over a sentient being to be executed for protecting the galaxy from its own greed. Her eyes fell on the emergency evacuation pod built into the back wall of the medical bay. Every frontier station had them, meant to save medical staff and critical patients during catastrophic failures. The pods were fast, shielded, and equipped with basic life support. They were also programmed with randomized jump coordinates to prevent them from being tracked during evacuations. It was insane. She would be throwing away everything she had built, making herself a fugitive, putting herself against the most powerful organization in the galaxy. But when Sarah looked at the small dragon watching her with those trusting golden eyes, she knew she had already made her choice the moment she refused to step away in the corridor. Can you fly? She asked the dragon. Even with the injured wing? The dragon struggled to its feet and extended its wings experimentally. The bandaged one held barely. It would not be comfortable, but it would work for short distances. Sarah began throwing medical supplies into an emergency pack. Bandages, medicines, a portable diagnostic scanner, everything she could carry. The door was starting to glow red where they were cutting through the lock. Listen carefully, she said to the dragon as she worked. I'm going to get us off this station, but I need you to trust me completely. No matter what happens, stay with me. Can you do that? The dragon's response was not telepathic this time. It simply walked over and pressed its head against her leg, a gesture of trust that transcended species. Sarah scooped up the dragon and ran for the evacuation pod. Behind her, she heard the medical bay door explode inward. Torvax's shout of rage, the pounding of armored feet on metal decking. She threw herself and the dragon into the pod, slapping the emergency launch button. The pod's door sealed with a hiss of pressurization. Through the small viewport, she saw Torvax's face twisted with fury as the pod ejected from the station in a burst of compressed gas. Then they were tumbling through space, the pod's small engines firing to orient them. The navigation computer was already calculating a random jump point, standard evacuation protocol. Sarah held the dragon close as the pod shuddered around them. Well, she said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her racing heart, I guess there's no going back now. The dragon made a small chirping sound that might have been agreement or might have been terror. Sarah could relate to both emotions. The pod's computer chimed, announcing jump calculations complete. In 30 seconds, they would enter hyperspace, heading to a location neither she nor anyone else would know until they arrived. Once they jumped, tracking them would be nearly impossible. Sarah watched through the viewport as Kepler 9 station shrank in the distance. She could see small ships launching from the docking bays, pursuit vessels trying to intercept them before they jumped. But they were too slow. The pod had too much of a lead. Your mother asked you to find truth speakers, Sarah said to the dragon. Well, you found one. Now we're going to make sure the galaxy knows what the council did, and we're going to stop them from accessing those ruins. I don't know how yet, but we'll figure it out. The jump countdown reached 0. Space twisted around them, and the universe turned inside out for a moment that felt like eternity. When reality reasserted itself, they were somewhere else entirely, floating in the darkness between stars with nothing but a small medical pod in each other. Sarah activated the pod's long-range scanner, trying to figure out where they had ended up. As the results came in, she felt a chill run down her spine. The random jump had brought them to the edge of the Shattered Veil Nebula itself, the very place the Council wanted so desperately to reach, the place the dragon's mother had died protecting. The dragon sensed it too. It pressed against the viewport, making a sound halfway between a cry and a song. Sarah could feel the emotion radiating from it. Home. Danger. Destiny. Of course, Sarah muttered, because nothing about this situation could be simple. The Shattered Veil Nebula lived up to its name. Vast clouds of luminous gas stretched across the viewport in shades of purple and gold, shot through with veins of something that sparkled like broken glass. Sensor readings showed unusual energy, signatures throughout the region, fluctuations that made navigation treacherous. No wonder the Council had trouble accessing whatever lay hidden here. Sarah checked the pod supplies while the dragon pressed against the viewport, transfixed by the sight of the nebula. They had enough food and water for maybe a week, if she rationed carefully. The pod's fusion battery could last 3 times that long, but food would become a problem long before power did. More concerning was the communication situation. The pod's emergency beacon was broadcasting automatically, standard protocol for evacuations. But out here, who would respond? Council ships would be searching for them, but Sarah doubted any rescue would end well for either her or her young passenger. She was reaching to deactivate the beacon when the pod's proximity alarm shrieked. Sarah's fingers flew across the controls, pulling up tactical displays. A ship had just dropped out of hyperspace less than 1,000 kilometers away. Far too close to be coincidence. Far too fast to be random. The ship was unlike anything Sarah had seen before. It was sleek and organic-looking, with sweeping curves that seemed to flow rather than angular human or standard alien designs. Its hull appeared to be made of the same crystalline material that veined the nebula itself, refracting light in impossible ways. The dragon went absolutely still, its entire body rigid. Sarah felt a pulse of recognition from it, mixed with confusion and hope. Before Sarah could react, her communication console lit up with an incoming signal. She hesitated, finger hovering over the accept button. This could be a council trap, or it could be something worse. The dragon made a soft sound and placed one small claw on her hand, pushing it toward the accept button. Trust, it seemed to say. Whatever this is, we need to trust it. Sarah pressed the button. A holographic display materialized above the console, and Sarah found herself looking at a face that made her gasp. It was humanoid, but definitely not human. The being had pale skin with an almost translucent quality, and its eyes were the same golden color as the dragon's. Delicate horns curved back from its temples, and when it spoke, Sarah could see small fangs. "Human doctor," the being said, its voice carrying harmonics that no human throat could produce. "You carry the last daughter of Thessalia. This is unexpected. We had thought all her children dead." Sarah's mind raced. The being looked like a dragon in humanoid form. But that was impossible. Dragons were dragons. They did not have other forms, except she was working with species that had been around for millions of years. Who knew what was actually possible? "Who are you?" Sarah asked, pulling the dragon protectively closer. "How do you know about her mother?" The being's expression softened, a flicker of old grief crossing its features. "I am Korvath, last of the Seekers. Thessalia was my bond sister, assigned to guard the eastern approach to the sanctuary while I watched the northern. When her telepathic presence vanished from the network, I knew the Council had finally made their move. I have been searching for survivors ever since." The dragon chirped and squirmed in Sarah's arms, clearly wanting to reach toward the hologram. Sarah held firm, not yet convinced this was not some elaborate trap. "Prove it," she said. "Prove you're what you claim to be." Korvath smiled sadly. "A wise response. Your species' paranoia serves you well, human. Very well. The young one can confirm my identity. Let her touch your mind while we speak, and she will recognize truth from deception. Sarah felt the dragon's consciousness brush against hers again, this time gentler and more controlled. It was learning to communicate with her human mind, adapting to her species' particular neural structure. She felt the dragon's attention split, part of it focused on her, and part reaching out toward Korvath's image. If you're her bond brother, Sarah said carefully, then you know what the council wants. You know about the sanctuary and the ancient ruins. I do, and I know that you, Dr. Sarah Chen of Earth, have just become one of the most wanted beings in the galaxy by choosing to protect Thessalia's daughter. The council has declared you a terrorist and a kidnapper. They are offering substantial rewards for your capture. Sarah's stomach dropped. She had expected consequences, but hearing it stated so plainly made it real in a way it had not been before. Her old life was truly gone. There would be no going back, no negotiating her way out of this. Why should I trust you? She asked. Maybe you're working with the council. Maybe this is all a setup to get us to lower our guard. Korvath's expression turned serious. You should not trust me. Not yet. Trust must be earned between strangers. But consider this. If I wanted to capture you, I could simply take your pod by force. My ship's tractor beam is more than capable. Instead, I am asking for permission to bring you aboard, to offer you shelter and protection, and to help ensure that Thessalia's sacrifice was not in vain. The dragon's mental touch strengthened, and Sarah felt a wave of emotion, recognition, relief, and most importantly, trust. The dragon knew this being, or at least knew of him through inherited memories. Korvath was telling the truth. Sarah took a deep breath. This was another decision point, another moment where she could still theoretically turn back. Except she really could not. The council would never let her explain or negotiate. She had seen too much, knew too much, and had broken too many rules. Her only path now was forward. All right, she said. We'll come aboard. But I'm keeping my medical scanner active, and at the first sign of betrayal, I'm triggering the pod's self-destruct. It might not hurt your ship much, but it'll definitely ruin your day. Korvath's laugh was unexpected and surprisingly warm. I see why Thessalia's daughter chose you as her truth speaker. Your species has a refreshing directness. Very well, Dr. Chen. Prepare for transport. The hologram vanished, and a moment later, Sarah felt the pod shudder as Korvath's ship locked onto them with a tractor beam. The sensation of being pulled through space was disorienting, and she held the dragon close, murmuring reassurances as much to herself as to her small patient. The pod was drawn into a landing bay that seemed impossibly large for a ship of the size she had seen on sensors. The interior was all flowing curves and soft light, nothing like the harsh angles and bright illumination of standard council vessels. As the pod settled onto a landing pad, Sarah noticed strange markings on the walls, symbols that seemed to shift and change when she looked at them directly. The pod's door hissed open, and Sarah stepped out cautiously, the dragon in her arms. The air was warm and smelled faintly of ozone and something sweet she could not identify. Korvath stood waiting at the far end of the bay, no longer a hologram, but solid and real. He was tall, easily 2 meters, and moved with a grace that reminded Sarah of dancers or predators. His clothing was simple but elegantly crafted, appearing to be made from the same material as his ship. As Sarah approached, she noticed that his eyes caught the light the same way the dragon's did. "Welcome to the Star Whisper," Korvath said, gesturing to encompass the ship around them. "It is not much, but it has been my home for longer than your species has known space travel." The dragon squirmed free from Sarah's arms and landed on the deck with surprising agility despite its injuries. It approached Korvath slowly, cautiously, then made a sound that Sarah had not heard before. A complex trill that seemed to carry multiple harmonics simultaneously. Korvath knelt down and extended one hand. The dragon sniffed it, then rubbed its head against his palm. Korvath's eyes closed briefly, and Sarah saw his expression shift through several emotions: grief, relief, determination. "She is strong," he said softly. "Thessalia's strength lives on in her, And she has named you human. Did you know that? Sarah blinked. Named me? What do you mean? Dragons do not use names the way your species does, but they recognize individuals by the pattern of their souls, the unique resonance of their being. This little one has marked you as her chosen protector, her truth speaker. In the old way, this makes you bondkin. It is not a bond entered lightly. Sarah looked down at the dragon who had returned to her side and was now looking up at her expectantly. She had signed up to be a frontier doctor, to treat injuries and maybe get into a little excitement. She had not signed up to become spiritually bonded to an alien dragon and caught in a conspiracy that spanned the galaxy. But then again, she had also not signed up to watch an innocent creature be executed. She had made her choices. Now she would live with them. All right, Sarah said. I'm bondkin. Now what? The council won't stop hunting us. And from what I understand, there are ancient ruins in this nebula that everyone seems desperate to either protect or exploit. What's our next move? Corvath stood and looked out at the swirling colors of the shattered veil through the landing bay's transparent wall. Now, Dr. Chen, we do what Thessalia could not. We gather evidence. We document the truth about the sanctuary and why it must remain sealed. And then we take that truth to the one place the council cannot suppress it. The human assembly. Sarah felt a chill run through her. The human assembly was the central governing body of all human G-heads with the older. Sarah could not look away from the massive seed-like structure. Just staring at it made her feel small and insignificant, like an insect contemplating the sun. Her rational mind tried to categorize what she was seeing, to fit it into frameworks of physics and biology she understood. But every attempt failed. This was something beyond her comprehension, beyond human understanding entirely. What is it? She whispered. The seed of possibility, Corvath replied, his voice heavy with reverence and dread. The architect's greatest and most terrible creation. It contains within it every potential outcome, every possible reality, every path the universe might take. In the wrong hands, it could be used to rewrite reality itself, to undo history, to reshape existence according to one being's will. Sarah tore her gaze away from the seed, feeling sick. And the council wants access to this? They do not truly understand what it is. They see only power, only opportunity. They believe they can control it, use it to cement their authority over the galaxy. But the seed does not answer to authority or strength. It responds only to balance, to those who seek not to dominate but to preserve. The dragon made a soft sound and jumped from the console to Sarah's shoulder, a position it had never attempted before. The weight was negligible, but the symbolism was clear. It trusted her completely, chose her as its protector and partner. Sarah reached up to steady it, feeling the rapid beat of its heart through her fingers. How do we prove this to the human assembly? Sarah asked. We can't exactly bring them here. And even if we could, would they believe what they were seeing? Corvath manipulated the controls, and the ship began a slow orbit around the seed. The sanctuary contains archives, records left by the architects themselves. They documented everything, from the creation of the seed to the disasters that befell civilizations who tried to use it. I can access those records with the young one's help. Once we have them, we will have irrefutable proof of what the council is truly seeking and why it must never be found. Sarah nodded, watching as strange symbols began appearing on the transparent walls around them. They looked like writing, but they moved and shifted, rearranging themselves constantly. Her translator implant struggled with them, catching fragments of meaning, but never complete thoughts. There is something else you should know, Corvath said quietly. The council will not stop hunting you. Even if we expose their plans, even if the human assembly sanctions them, there are those within the council who will see this through to the end. They have invested too much, risked too much to turn back now. You will spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Sarah had already suspected as much, but hearing it stated so plainly still made her stomach tighten. Then I guess I better make sure that life counts for something. If I'm going to be a fugitive anyway, might as well be a fugitive who saved the galaxy. She meant it as a joke, trying to lighten the mood, but Corvath turned to look at her with an expression of profound seriousness. You jest, but you speak truth. The architects left prophecies along with their warnings. Most are vague and open to interpretation, but one has always been clear. When the guardians fall and the seed lies vulnerable, a truth speaker from a young race will stand between destruction and preservation. Many of us believed this referred to some future species, one that had not yet evolved, but perhaps the architects meant humanity all along. Sarah felt the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders alongside the dragon. No pressure then. A chiming sound interrupted them. Korvath's expression darkened as he checked his instruments. We have a problem. Multiple hyperspace signatures just appeared at the nebula's edge. Council warships, at least 6 of them, possibly more. Sarah's heart lurched. How did they find us so fast? They must have been tracking energy signatures, waiting for someone to activate the sanctuary's defenses. When the young one sang the Guardian song, it would have created a pulse detectable even through the nebula's interference. Korvath's hands moved rapidly across the controls. We have perhaps an hour before they can navigate through the energy fields to reach us. We need to retrieve the archive data immediately. The ship accelerated toward one of the crystalline towers. As they approached, Sarah saw an opening appear in the structure, a doorway that had not existed moments before. Korvath guided them inside, and they found themselves in a chamber that seemed impossibly vast compared to the tower's exterior dimensions. Stay close to me and the young one, Korvath instructed as they disembarked. The sanctuary responds to guardian bloodlines, but it can be unpredictable. Do not touch anything unless I tell you it is safe. They walked across a floor that looked like frozen starlight, their footsteps making no sound. The dragon had become more animated, chirping and trilling as it looked around. Through their bond, Sarah felt waves of recognition and something like joy. This place felt like home to the creature, encoded in its very DNA. The chamber walls were covered in more of the shifting symbols, and as they walked, images began appearing in the air around them. Holographic projections, Sarah realized, but far more advanced than anything she had seen. They showed scenes from millions of years ago, the architects in their prime, beings of pure energy contained in vaguely humanoid forms. She watched them build wonders and commit atrocities in equal measure, always pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Then came the disasters. Entire star systems collapsing as experiments went wrong. Civilizations wiped out by weapons that unmade matter itself. Reality fracturing and healing itself, leaving scars that still existed in deep space. Sarah watched, in horror, as the architects realized what they had become, what they had done. This is what they wanted the Council to understand, Korvath said softly. Power without wisdom leads only to destruction. The seed is not a tool. It is a test, and every species that has attempted to use it has failed. At the chamber's center stood a pedestal made of the same crystalline material as everything else. Hovering above it was a small sphere that glowed with soft blue light. Korvath approached it carefully, then gestured for the dragon to come forward. We need your blood print, he explained. Only a guardian can authorize the release of archive data. The dragon jumped from Sarah's shoulder and landed on the pedestal. It touched its small claw to the sphere, and immediately the light intensified. The sphere rose into the air and split apart, revealing a data crystal inside. But as Korvath reached for it, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. They are here, Korvath said grimly. The Council ships have reached the sanctuary's perimeter faster than I anticipated. They must have brought jump-capable assault craft. Sarah heard explosions in the distance, muffled by the thick crystal walls but still ominous. Can the defenses stop them? The automated systems will slow them down, but not forever. The Council has been studying these structures for years. They know how to disable some of the defenses. Korvath grabbed the data crystal and began running back toward the ship. We need to leave now. They sprinted across the chamber, the dragon flying alongside them despite its injured wing. Behind them, Sarah heard the sound of weapons fire growing closer. The Council forces were breaching the tower. They reached the ship and threw themselves inside. Korvath did not even wait for them to strap in before launching, the ship shooting out of the tower, opening like a bullet from a gun. Sarah grabbed a railing to keep from being thrown across the bridge, and the dragon dug its claws into her jacket to maintain its grip. Through the transparent walls, Sarah saw chaos. Council assault ships were swarming around the sanctuary like angry insects. The automated defenders were fighting back, but the Council forces had adapted. They were using weapons that seemed to disrupt the energy fields powering the defenses, creating gaps in the protection. "They are going to reach the seed," Korvath said, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Even without proper authorization, they can attempt to breach it. The attempt alone could destabilize this entire region of space." Sarah watched as a particularly large Council vessel moved toward the central sphere where the seed floated. "Can we stop them?" "Not directly. My ship has weapons, but nothing that could challenge a fleet this size." Korvath banked sharply to avoid incoming fire. "But there is something we can do, something desperate and likely suicidal." "I'm listening," Sarah said, helping the dragon settle more securely on her shoulder. Korvath brought up a holographic display showing the sanctuary structure. "The seed has failsafe protocols. If the Guardians determine that security has been irreversibly compromised, they can initiate a temporal lock. It would freeze this entire section of space in a time bubble, making it impossible to access for at least 1,000 years, long enough for the current Council leadership to die, and hopefully for the galaxy to forget about this place." "That sounds better than letting them get their hands on it," Sarah said. "What's the catch?" "The temporal lock requires 3 things. Authorization from a Guardian, a functioning sanctuary control node, and someone to manually activate the lock from inside the time bubble. That person would be trapped inside, frozen in time for a millennium," Sarah felt. Sarah's mind raced as Korvath piloted the ship through the chaos of battle. Council assault craft were everywhere now, their weapons tearing into the ancient defenses. She watched as one of the automated defenders exploded in a shower of light. Its million-year vigil ended in an instant. The sanctuary was falling, and without intervention the Council would reach the seed within minutes. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked. 10 minutes, perhaps less," Korvath replied. "The control node is at the base of the central spire. I can get us there, but getting back out after activation will be impossible." The time bubble forms instantly. The dragon chirped frantically, pressing against Sarah's neck. Through their bond, she felt a storm of emotions: fear, grief, desperation. But underneath it all was something else, a sense of wrongness about Korvath's plan. The dragon was trying to tell her something, but the telepathic connection was not precise enough for complex ideas. Sarah thought about everything she had learned. The Guardians, the Architects, the prophecy about a truth speaker from a young race. And suddenly pieces began clicking into place in her mind. "Wait," she said. "The temporal lock needs someone to activate it from inside. But does it specifically need to be you?" Korvath glanced at her, confused. "I am the only one capable of interfacing with Architect technology. The young one lacks the knowledge, and you lack the biological compatibility." "But I'm human," Sarah said, the idea forming even as she spoke it. "My species is notorious for adapting to alien technology. We reverse engineer things we barely understand. We make systems work that were never designed for us. What if that's what the prophecy meant? Not that a human would prevent someone from accessing the seed, but that a human would be able to activate protections that no one else could?" Korvath's eyes widened. "That is absurd. The interface requires specific neural patterns that only Guardian kin possess. A human mind would be incompatible." "Unless the interface adapted," Sarah pressed. "The Architects built everything to last millions of years. That means adaptability, the ability to respond to changing circumstances. And they left prophecies suggesting someone from a young race would be important. What if they built in the capability for that young race to interface with their systems?" The dragon was practically vibrating with excitement now, its agreement radiating through their bond. It knew. Somehow, through inherited memories or instinct, it knew Sarah was right. Korvath was silent for a moment, navigating through a particularly dense cluster of fighting ships. Finally, he spoke. "It is a desperate theory built on speculation and hope. But we are in a desperate situation. If you are wrong, you will die when you touch the interface. Your mind will burn out trying to connect with something beyond its capability. And if I'm right," Sarah said, "you get to live. You can take the dragon and escape. You can deliver the archive data to the human assembly. You can make sure the galaxy knows what happened here. She took a deep breath. I'm already a fugitive with no life to return to. Let me do this. Let me be the truth speaker the prophecy mentioned. She could see Korvath struggling with the decision. He was ancient and wise, had seen civilizations rise and fall, and now a human who had been in space for barely 20 years was suggesting she could do what he had trained his entire life to do. It must have seemed absurd, but the dragon settled the matter. It launched itself from Sarah's shoulder and flew directly to Korvath, hovering in front of his face. It sang a single clear note, and even without telepathy, Sarah could tell what it was saying. Trust her. Let her try. Korvath closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. Very well, Dr. Chen, we will try it your way. But understand what you are volunteering for. If the temporal lock activates, you will be frozen in time for 1,000 years. When you wake, if you wake, everyone you knew will be dead. Your species will have evolved beyond anything you recognize. You will be more alone than any human has ever been. Sarah had already considered that. Strangely, it did not frighten her as much as it should have. She had no family, few close friends. Her life had been her work, and out here on the frontier that work had often felt meaningless. But this, stopping the Council from accessing reality-altering technology, this felt like something worth sacrificing for. I understand, she said simply. Let's do it. Korvath altered their course, diving toward the central spire. Council ships moved to intercept, but the remaining automated defenders rallied, creating a brief opening. The ship shook from nearby explosions as they descended through layers of crystalline architecture. They landed in a small chamber at the spire's base. The control node was immediately obvious, a sphere of swirling energy suspended in the center of the room. Unlike the other architect technology Sarah had seen, this one looked angry. Bolts of what might have been lightning crackled across its surface, and the air around it shimmered with heat or radiation. Once you touch it, the process begins immediately. Korvath explained as they hurried from the ship. You will need to maintain contact until the temporal lock fully activates. That will take approximately 3 minutes. During that time, you will experience what the architects called the weight of eternity. Every moment of those 3 minutes will feel like hours. Many who attempted this in the past went mad from the experience. Comforting, Sarah muttered. She turned to the dragon, which had followed them out of the ship. She knelt down and stroked its head gently. You need to go with Korvath. He'll keep you safe and make sure the galaxy knows the truth. Can you do that for me? The dragon's eyes shimmered with what looked like tears. It made a soft, mournful sound and pressed its head against her hand one last time. Through their bond, Sarah felt a complex mixture of gratitude, sorrow, and something that felt like love. In their short time together, they had formed a connection that transcended species. I know, Sarah whispered. I'll miss you too. But you're going to do great things. Your mother knew it. That's why she fought so hard to protect you. An explosion rocked the chamber. The Council forces had breached the outer defenses and were closing in. Sarah stood and approached the control node. Up close, it was even more intimidating. She could feel power radiating from it, a sensation that made her skin crawl and her teeth ache. Korvath placed a hand on her shoulder. For what it is worth, Dr. Chen, it has been an honor knowing you. Your species may be young, but you carry wisdom that many ancient races have forgotten. The willingness to sacrifice for others, to stand for truth even at personal cost. If the prophecy is real, then perhaps the architects chose well when they accounted for humanity. Sarah managed a shaky smile. Tell my people what happened here. Make sure the Council faces consequences, and take care of the little one. She deserves a chance to grow up in a galaxy that remembers what Guardians are really for. I swear it, Korvath said solemnly. Another explosion, much closer this time. Through the chamber's entrance, Sarah could see Council troops advancing. They had perhaps seconds left. Sarah reached out and touched the control node. The universe exploded into her mind. She had expected pain, but this was beyond pain. It was information, vast and incomprehensible, flooding into her consciousness at speeds that should have destroyed her brain. She saw the birth of stars and the death of galaxies. She watched civilizations rise to greatness and fall to dust. She experienced 1,000,000 lifetimes in the space of a heartbeat, and through it all she felt the architects watching, not as individuals but as a collective consciousness that had transcended physical form. They had been waiting, she realized, waiting for a species that could balance wisdom with youth, power with humility, waiting for someone who would choose preservation over dominion. The architects had not designed the interface to reject incompatible minds. They had designed it to find compatible ones. And against all odds, Sarah's human mind, chaotic and messy and illogical, was compatible in ways that made sense only to beings who thought in dimensions beyond normal understanding. She felt the temporal lock protocols activating. Energy flowed through her, using her body as a conduit to reshape the fabric of space-time around the sanctuary. She was dimly aware of Korvath and the dragon retreating to the ship, of council troops bursting into the chamber only to freeze as time began to distort around them. The 3 minutes Korvath had warned about stretched into subjective hours. Sarah experienced every nanosecond as time slowed and then stopped entirely. She saw the chamber crystallizing around her, everything becoming locked in an eternal moment. The council troops stood frozen mid-step, their weapons raised, expressions of shock permanently etched on their alien faces. And then, just before everything stopped completely, Sarah felt something unexpected. The architect's consciousness reached out to her one final time. Not a message in words, but a gift, a promise. When she woke in 1,000 years, she would not wake alone or forgotten. The architects would leave something for her, information and knowledge that would help her navigate the future galaxy. They were investing in humanity's potential, betting that 1,000 years from now, humans would be ready to understand what the seed truly represented. Sarah tried to respond, to thank them, but time had already stopped. The chamber fell silent. The temporal bubble had formed, sealing away the sanctuary and everything within it. The human assembly chamber on Earth was packed to capacity when Korvath arrived. Every representative from every human colony, station, and fleet had gathered, along with observers from dozens of non-council-aligned species. Word of what had happened in the Shattered Veil had spread through unofficial channels, whispers and rumors that the council had tried desperately to suppress. But the truth, as humans like to say, had a way of getting out. Korvath stood at the central podium, the white dragon perched on his shoulder. She had grown in the 3 months since Sarah's sacrifice, now the size of a large eagle with gleaming scales and wings that caught the light like prisms. The growth was accelerated, triggered by trauma and necessity. She would never be as large as her mother, but she carried Thessalia's strength in her eyes and bearing. "Honored representatives," Korvath began, his voice amplified through the chamber's systems. "I come before you with evidence of crimes that threaten not just humanity, but all sentient life in the galaxy. The Galactic Council has attempted to access technology that could unravel the very fabric of reality. And one of your own, Dr. Sarah Chen, gave up everything to stop them. He activated the data crystal and holographic projections filled the chamber. The assembly watched in silence as the architect's archives played out their testimony. Millennia of history condensed into undeniable proof. The creation of the seed, the warnings left behind, the disasters that befell every species that tried to use it. And finally, recent recordings from the sanctuary's sensors showing council forces attacking, showing the white dragons dying, showing Sarah making her choice. When the presentation ended, the chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted questions and accusations. Some demanded immediate action against the council. Others called for caution, warning that humanity could not afford to make enemies of the galaxy's most powerful organization. The assembly's speaker, an elderly woman named Chairperson Amara Okonkwo, called for order. When the chamber finally quieted, she spoke with the authority of someone who had navigated human politics for over 5 decades. "Seeker Korvath, these accusations are extraordinary. The council will deny everything. They will claim the evidence is fabricated, that Dr. Chen was a terrorist, that the white dragons were dangerous predators. What proof do we have that cannot be dismissed or explained away?" Korvath reached up and gently stroked the dragon's head. She responded by singing, a clear crystalline note that resonated throughout the chamber. Every human present felt something shift in their minds, a brief telepathic contact that carried absolute truth. They saw through the dragon's eyes, felt what she felt, knew what she knew. The memories were fragmented but genuine, impossible to fake or manipulate. The young guardian can share her memories directly with those who wish to see, Korvath explained. She cannot force the connection, but those who open their minds will know the truth beyond any doubt. This is something the council cannot fake, cannot spin, cannot deny, truth speaking in its purest form. Chairperson Okonkwo was silent for a long moment, her expression showing that she had felt the dragon's contact. Finally she nodded. Then we have everything we need. This assembly formally recognizes the White Dragons as sentient beings under the protection of the Sentience Accords. Any action taken against them is an act of genocide, punishable under galactic law. She turned to address the full assembly. Furthermore, we are filing formal charges with the Interstellar Justice Court against the members of the Galactic Council involved in this conspiracy. If the Council refuses to cooperate with the investigation, humanity will withdraw from Council jurisdiction and establish our own alliance of independent systems. We will not be complicit in genocide and the pursuit of weapons that threaten all life. The chamber erupted again, but this time the tone was different. The representatives were not arguing but planning. Humanity had always been outsiders in the galactic community, too young and too different to fit comfortably into existing power structures. But that outsider status gave them freedom that older species lacked. They could challenge the Council in ways that others could not. In the weeks that followed, the political landscape shifted dramatically. The evidence Korvath presented could not be ignored or suppressed. Independent news networks broadcast the Architect's archives. The Dragon's ability to share truth telepathically meant that anyone willing to listen could verify the facts for themselves.